Hello and welcome to another episode of Soft Spaces. Today is a very interesting and important subject or topic again. It is trauma that we don't call trauma or that we refuse to acknowledge as trauma. Now, this is a very complex issue. It can be looked at from a gendered lens, it can be looked at from a community lens, all kinds of things. It's nuanced, it's layered. Uh, Obviously, one conversation is not nearly enough for it, but at a fundamental level, this propensity of normalizing uh, what is clearly trauma is something that we feel is very, very important to address. So, episode 6 of Soft Spaces brought to you by Kushia Clinic and Driveway Devi. Trauma we don't call trauma. Welcome and welcome, Kushi.
Thank you, Karthik. This episode is deeply personal, not just as a therapist, but also as a person who has had to eventually unlearn so much what I thought was, normal. Let me start by saying this trauma isn't always loud, it doesn't always come with bruises or breakdowns. Sometimes it could be silent dinners. Sometimes it sounds like what will people say. Sometimes it feels like shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable around you. This is everyday trauma, cultural, relational, systematic. There's an author called Mark Wallen in It Didn't Start With You, talks about inherited family trauma, pains that pass down through behavior, language, silence, and roles. So often in our Indian households, obedience is rewarded, questioning is punished, emotions are dismissed, and we call it culture.
Hmm.
So there's also one more thing that I'd like to talk about, which is research in epigenetics shows that trauma responses can be passed down through generations. But beyond biology, it's the emotional conditioning, the roles, the stories, the silences that wound us. For example, men don't cry. So boys learn not to cry, and their entire energy is then converted into anger. A girl is praised for sacrificing, and whenever she says no to something, whether it's a role, whether it is a relationship, whether it is as little as I don't want to eat this, she will be scolded for saying no. So there's acceptance for sacrifice, and there is scolding for saying no. And Dr. Reshma Menakam, in her book My Grandmother's Hand, very prominently says and highlights that the body carries trauma, and if we don't metabolize it, we pass it on.
Hmm.
What happens in family, caste, a culture which lives in the nervous system.
That's very, very beautifully explained. In fact, a lot of times there is, through silence or through other actions or inactions, a lot of invalidation and diminishing of identity that takes place. I often quote this example. It's very, very sad. After my wife Anuja and I moved from Bombay back to Jaipur, and therefore I'm talking about current times. Not on one occasion, on multiple occasions, the doorbell would ring and she would open the door, and the gentleman standing would say, "Isn't anybody at home?"
Mhm.
So you see, and Acha, now the thing to note here also is that that individual who is making this statement is probably not consciously trying to invalidate or hurt anyone. And therein is the proof of it having been passed down and inherited and normalized and internalized. So it's it's a very sad reality. And as Kushi very correctly said, whether various euphemisms ranging from this is our proud culture. I went to a boarding school. I can tell you that bullying is considered a rite of passage, where it is again normalized and legitimized on the basis of it being labeled and called and seen as an extremely proud tradition. So there are all these kinds of things that take place on an everyday basis in each and every home. And we have become so accustomed to them that at the very least, we have no concept of what's going on. And even worse still, if we do, we choose to turn a blind eye because that's just how things are. So I'm not even sure, Kushi, where to begin or carry on our discussion in terms of whether we should talk a little bit more. You want to tell us in detail about what these things are, whether we should perhaps talk about how one can even begin to, sort of address some of these things. Is it, individuals who gather the courage to start redefining certain boundaries for themselves?
So when it comes to helping clients who are unable to see what they have accepted as normal may not be healthy, the first thing that we begin with is permission to question. Not blame, not hate, just notice. I often ask, where did you first learn that softness was weakness? Or whose voice are you carrying when you say you're not good enough? What would it mean to not pass this down to, your younger generation? So it's like loosening a very tightly wound knot, gently, respectfully, but honestly. And there was this one client that I remember. She was 20, he was a 26-year-old man who told me that he had not cried since he was a kid. And when he finally did in therapy, he mentioned that if his dad saw him like this, he'd call him spineless. So we traced how this toughness, this aura of toughness was just, ungrieved loss that was present with him. I also remember there was a woman in her 30s who hated being called the obedient daughter or the dutiful daughter or the, that she's a good daughter,
Hmm.
because it meant abandoning her dreams.
Hmm.
She said, I didn't choose sacrifice. I had to inherit it because that's what I saw. So when I had to leave my job because my husband's family wanted a child,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I did not want that kid.
Hmm.
Uh, but because of societal norms, I was forced to, leave the job that I was working for the first, 30 years of my life.
Um, Another thought was coming to my mind, and I got slightly preoccupied. You inadvertently brought up an extremely important facet of this that I want to revisit and sort of highlight a little more, which is, and this happened with me, and I know that it happens with a lot of other people because I've spoken to them. Oftentimes, this sort of trauma and this kind of internalization of status quo and conditioning is something that as individuals we begrudgingly or in a passive way we make our peace with it and we follow it and we go through with it. When you have a child and you become a parent, then a lot of these things come to the surface and it compels you to start examining things again because you are suddenly in a position where you are seeing it in an external form, probably be at the risk of being passed on to your child. and then it becomes very real, and then it becomes very personal in insofar as that, oh my god, I don't want my child to sort of be this way, or have this understanding of life and gender and whatever it may be. So yeah, that's a point that I wanted to make. If not sooner, at least at that point, this sort of consciousness does tend to come in and can come in, and I think it's an opportune time to actually respond to it in a manner of making certain changes, because you will at least then get on a path to mitigating some of it for the younger generation to come. So that was one point I wanted to make. The second one, very quickly, is that and again, this is going to sound, I'm just playing devil's advocate. It's one of the toughest things in the world to upset the proverbial apple cart. You may have all the correct and sincere and good intentions, and you may tell yourself that, I'm the one in this family who's going to stop this ripple effect and, recast the status quo and all that. But the kind of courage and resilience and gumption it requires is not, it's easier said than done, let's say. So my question simply is, the question is simple, the answer isn't, is how does one begin that process?
Okay. So, so coming back to the first question, is that there are many cultural norms that are rooted in control and fear,
Hmm,
right? But um, they're dressed as respect, honor, or family duty. So, for example, we respect elders even if they are abusing us, right? Or we try to adjust even if it means we are losing our self identity.
hmm, hmm,
Or this is very common in Indian households. Don't air your dirty laundry,
hmm,
even if you're drowning in it, right? So there's this book by All About Love, written by Bell Hooks, in which he talks about abuse and neglect cannot be excused as cultural values.
hmm.
That quote is something I return to very often, and I also share it with my clients. Uh, we must always ask, are our values nurturing or negating our aliveness? Coming to how we try to unlearn, the things that we as a society have normalized. So this is how we begin. The first is we name it. Uh, for example, I felt afraid, not loved when scolded, right? The second is we interrupt it. I'm choosing not to use shame as a parenting tool, right? So you avoid it. And the third is we try to repair it, apologize, even if it is to our kid, even if in return we are not going to get an apology, we try to repair it. And the fourth is we try to replace it, we try to build rituals around emotional safety, ask how someone feels, not just what they did. And above all, we try to allow softness, because that's how we try and end cycles.
Very, very helpful. A related aspect to this, which is also something that I have personally encountered quite a lot of times, and it's just as upsetting each time, is that there are certain statements that people make which are highly reflective of this sort of these sorts of patterns. For instance, mm, a lady will say, "Oh, my parents, stroke my husband was so supportive. I was allowed to do at X, Y, Z." Or, for example, so many women have said, "Oh, I'm just a housewife." Now, I don't, my question, I suppose, is that every time lay people interact with one another, because it's not always the case that one is seeking a professional intervention. When lay people interact with each other, let's say I'm with a group of friends and somebody makes a statement like this which is deeply distressing to me, and I am close enough to that individual to say something, what do I even say?
Yeah. So when we do, and of course, like you have heard these statements, I've heard these statements from people who are very close to me, who are entangled in the, blinders of cultural norms and the control and fear that comes along with it. We can try to, again, we try to question it. We try to provide them with a space where we can re-author their narrative, give them new perspective, um, reiterate a few statements by giving them. So, for example, if it is a woman who's telling that, I was allowed to do this, and had there not been any permission, what would you still not do it? So ask questions around that. Try to um, tell her story, which highlights her as the main character and gives her that platform that maybe she's not getting at home. And with her dad, with the brother, with the mother, with the in-laws or the husband, you try to give that platform, you try to provide that space where she can say that, even if they allowed it, I built it.
I have one follow up comment.
Mhm.
What you said makes perfect sense. My problem in this, not problem is not a good word, but my dilemma or quandary in this situation is at an even more fundamental level, which is that that person who's making specifically the first statement that we've been discussing, that, oh, I was so lucky, I was supported. Now, I'm just going to call a spade, is brainwashing that has taken place of convincing that individual that, oh, see, you've been so lucky and privileged, is a belief that that individual has adopted and developed, and she is extremely happy for it. So essentially, my problem, my quandary is that, so I'm going to tell her that, no, 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 there's nothing to be happy about. Actually, it's really sad. Is that okay?
No, no. So we have to validate the happiness that she's feeling, and through that validation, and after that validation, we also try to stick in that one question, that why do you think that you needed permission to do that, or being allowed to do that makes you happy because you're an obedient wife or a dutiful wife. Is that you know what makes you happy? So where this happiness is coming from, it's very like a lot of like layers to be peeled, and then
Hmm.
so we need to be very indirect, because if you're too direct, it's like a shocker for them,
Hmm.
because they believe in it and they have believed in it for 40 years, 50 years,
Yep.
whatever the age is. So you cannot bring it to them as a shocker. Like I said, we need to softly question, and we need to uh, through that questioning, we need to be very gentle, and sort of also see the readiness of the other person, right? We need to give ourselves and ask ourselves uh, the permission to question, and whether that other person is ready to be questioned. There's a lot of consent involved in all of this.
Hmm, that makes sense. And I think one has to be able to make a reasonably accurate determination of how that person seems to be responding, subtly suggest rather than state, nudge, hint. Would sort of probably be the way to go. Do you find that there is a difference, a vast one or a small one, between the genders as far as you know who's sort of been more at the receiving end of these prejudices, or it's pretty much to both?
I think it's to both. I cannot differentiate between which gender, of course, women have to make more sacrifices, but being a man is also not easy. I'm not once have I ever seen a man's life and been like, hey, that it comes so easily to him, or it's so easy to be, or the grass is greener on the other side. That's how we look at it, but it's not. And they also have to struggle, whether it is maintaining, being the backbone of the family. So if you are the backbone of the family, that means that you need to be strong enough, you need to be emotionally stable enough, you need to be steady enough, financially you need to be like the scary figure that the kids are scared of, or you are perceived as this emotionless person, which you are not, because human beings, of course, are not emotionless. We are meant to have emotions, we are meant to think from an emotional heart.
But
And
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. This is also I've heard ever so often, almost made into a virtue, that, oh my God, wo bahar se bada wo hai, but he's such a softy inside. All those kinds of things that one gets to hear. And if correct me if I'm wrong, we of course did our last episode pretty much on this sort of person when we did the strong ones thing. Uh, Finally, as we wrap up, what might be, because there are so many situations and aspects and facets of life in which this kind of trauma is taking place on a regular basis in all of our lives. What might be one or two, in your perception, specific negative areas in which this is, in your personal opinion, also most tragic?
I think in the day-to-day life of a mom or a homemaker, I feel that that's a very tragic life, because once the kids are grown up, you don't have any standing. You have to face a lot of criticism. You have to go through phases of abuse, whether it's from the in-laws, whether it's from the husband. And when the children grow up, uh, not all cases, the kids are happy with the mom. There is gaslighting that takes place. There is a lot of emotional distress that is present with the kids as well, especially if it's a male child, because dominance comes in over there. So I feel being a good mom, good enough mother, the entire concept of it is really harsh and difficult to go through, because you lose yourself, your identity, what you like, over the likes and choices of your husband, of your kids. You come last, you start putting yourself last, right?
So and I think you bring up a very, very important thing, and you'd agree, I think, that this happens on both levels. So once that role is largely over, of everyday supervision and involvement, and the kids have left the nest, etc. Not only is that lady, has she served her utility vis-a-vis the family, the in-laws, the husband, to herself also, she's purposeless.
Yeah. And that's what that is one of the reasons that women who are going through menopause are diagnosed with MDD, that is major depressive disorder,
Mm.
because they are facing the reality of life, not only biologically but also.
Yeah, so it tends to coincide with that period.
Yeah, it does.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we spoke about this because I don't think enough is said. There is almost a romanticized notion of a lot of this completely bizarre and unreasonable behavior and these patterns. They are not only are they euphemistically passed off, they are oftentimes celebrated. Lauded examples are made of them कि अरे इसको देखो and उसको देखो, and also it's and the reality is that it's the diametric opposite of anything worth celebrating. If anything, we should all be taking a good hard look inside and examining what we are up to. So that was Soft Spaces for today. We would really, really love it if each of us um, ponders some of the points that we've talked about, because it's pretty much impossible, although I'd love to be proved wrong, that in each of our families and social constructs, that this is not taking place in some form or fashion in some degree. So I think we can all benefit from a realistic look within and move towards a more equitable society. Kushi, thank you as
Thank
always, and we will see you in the next one. Bye bye.